privilege to have this opportunity. I want to thank Tom and Vanessa for hosting this. And I thank you all for coming so much. It means a great deal. And I want to acknowledge you too, family and friends, and retired faculty and staff, and students, alumni, and administrators. Just a wonderful group, and I'm so glad that you're here. I want to say too, I feel a little bit like Donald Trump, although I'm not selling steaks or champagne, but we are selling a book. Rod Grado is a wonderful artist, and I teamed up to create a book of spiritual reflections. We thank you for those of you who purchased it, and all the proceeds are going to the Women and Children's Program. And we thank Sister Jean and Catherine and Kim and all those that made this possible. So it's a wonderful, wonderful program for single moms, for moms and their children, earning their degrees and doing just terrific work. So they'll be on sale afterwards as well as steaks and champagne. Well, let me give a little bit of an overview for today, and I'm certainly not going to say anything that is new, but I really do believe that as we take our own experience and learning, and it kind of filters through ourselves, we make meaning. The topic, it's funny, when Michelle had called me, this kind of jumped right out of me, because the topic is really based upon a book that was really life-changing for me. And the book was written by a Christian contemplative by the name of Beatrice Brutto. And the name of the book was Radical Optimism. And it just turned me around. I tried to read some of her other books, but they're a little bit more philosophical. But this one just turned me around. So I offer my thanks to Beatrice Brutto. And I also am going to use a lot of Parker Palmer, Quaker, sociologist, scholar, and spiritual writer, and his book called To Know as We Are Known, Spirituality and Education. And just to give an overview, before I'm going to ask you to do a little something here today, my basic thesis, not mine, but one that I've learned from Parker Palmer and from Beatrice Brutto and from others, is that when we talk about the teaching-learning process, we're really talking about knowledge. And when we're talking about knowledge, we're really talking about relationship. Because all knowledge involves relationship. And I'll go a step further, as Parker Palmer did and Beatrice Brutto did, and said all knowledge requires a loving relationship. And of whatever it is we're learning, from whoever or from whatever it is. It's all about a loving relationship. And so this is about as high-tech as I get, and this is my PowerPoint. But if you take a look at your map there, and again, my maps are not known for it. I hope none of you have to study Rorschach, because this map is probably not pretty. But if you take a look at it, the basic idea that I'm trying to speak as much as I can find words is that here's you and I, and we have the capacity for a loving relationship, and that's just hardwired. That's built into who we are, and as we attempt to know the world around us, as we attempt to learn, we learn about ourselves, and we learn about the other, and to the extent that we learn about ourselves and other through a loving relationship, okay, we're really being impacted by some very powerful spiritual forces, which allow us to find our own self, even in that which we attempt to know, or that which we attempt to learn about. I'll say a little word about that. And then moving up, we find that we're all connected. As I look around this room, I realize that I couldn't be here if you weren't here. And I mean that. You ever wonder, you have a room, and it's filled with people. And you ever ask this, I wonder about this a lot. How did we all get in this room? Now, if I turn to my son, he's going to tell me, but I took the stairs and came to the back. How did we all get here? I mean, we come from such different backgrounds. right? And such different places, but for whatever reason, here we are at this moment. And I don't think that is by chance. As a matter of fact, I'm convinced that nothing is coincidental anymore, and that we're all connected. And so as we learn, whatever we learn, okay, we find that we're connected to what we might call the sacred web, okay? And then ultimately what we find is, and you can call whatever it is in your own words, whether we call it God or Yahweh or Allah or the sacred or the holy or the absolute, but we find that the very source of our capacity to learn is given to us by the font of loving, the font of relating, the font of knowing. That which some of us call God or Tao or Allah or Yahweh or whatever it is we refer to. When I was teaching on the Lakota Sioux, they referred to God as Wakantanka, the mystery beyond all mysteries, or Ate, Father, or Tankashila, Grandfather. And so it's this cycle. So that real deep learning, which is knowledge, is always relationship. Everything is in relationship, and ultimately, I believe, in my own experience, that the capacity for knowing and for being known comes from what I would call God, comes from the absolute. And so that's where I'm headed. Now, I'd like to ask you to do a little something, and you don't have to share anything at your table. But if you flip over the sheet I gave you, I have a list of a whole lot of things. And I'm calling this the other. All of these various things. Oh my God, Wayne, I can't believe you're here. Father, this is really going to be my last lecture because Father Wayne is here. Well, that's a shocker. Talk about the sacred web. But when we talk about other, it's anything that we attempt to know, whether it's an idea or a person or a place or a thing or a discipline. So just take a look at that list, and I want you to maybe just pick one thing in your life you love, or one person you love. Now, many, I'm sure. But maybe one you can even share with someone at your table. One thing you love. Maybe it's a place, or an idea, or it's your discipline. It's mathematics, or it's an object. You know, but something that you love. Okay? And of course you can list many things. And I'm calling that the other. Okay? Whatever it is that we can be in relationship to. It can be an idea. Okay? It can be a place. It can be a person. Okay? And my content, well, let me just give you a chance to do that right now. And then if you just take a moment, if you care, you don't have to, maybe just share with someone next to you something that you love. It could be a food. I know I choose food. But it could be a food. Okay? Something that you love.
I thought that too,
Well, let me call you back. You know, that's probably a lot more productive than you were talking to each other. But I would suggest that whatever you chose, whatever it was that you chose, okay, is if it's something you love, you're in relationship to it. And as you get to know it, whether it's a person or food, so too you are known. And this is Parker Palmer's thesis, that as we know through relationships, so too we are continually known. And you might say, well, known by who or what? Well, I would say known by God, known by others. That everything, even the scientists here, would probably agree that when you're looking through a microscope and you're looking at something that's subatomic, there is a relationship there. There's a passion there. And I would suggest that even at a subatomic level, to the extent we learn something about those molecules and atoms and compounds, we learn something about ourselves, and God learns something about us. So let me just, as we move along here, and I'm going to try to keep this relatively short because I know I keep looking at John, my son here, and I'm between him and the food. So I'm going to try to clarify some of the terms a little bit. But before I do, one of the things that I've learned, and it's been such a privilege, is that the classroom really is a sacred space, isn't it? You know, when you come in a space like this, it really is sacred. In the sense that we're putting whatever it is outside. And learning itself, knowledge itself, is such an optimistic enterprise. This is what Beatrice Ruteau says. She says that radical optimism has to do with the knowledge, and again, here we come to knowledge, the knowledge that we are loved, the knowledge that we belong, the knowledge that we have a place at the table. And that knowledge frees us then to learn, okay? And she would make the point that anytime I do something that's hurtful to me or to you, it's only because I haven't really embraced the fact that I'm really loved. And as a matter of fact, she said that the notion of sin really isn't a very good theological notion because nobody would hurt themselves or others if they were whole. And so Beatrice Ruteau talks about radical optimism as something that is that capacity for being loved. And she says something else, and this is on your the outline on the flip side. I have a quote from Beatrice. She said, "If you can really believe that someone is sustaining you, that all the self-defense operations are going to evaporate, it is at the moment when you believe yourself to be loved that salvation takes place." Well, what I would say by salvation, coming from the Latin word wholeness, takes place. To the extent that I believe that I'm loved, that I belong, that I don't have to prove myself, that I'm more than my small ego. I'm more than reputation. I'm more than things that I do. Okay, to that degree, salvation takes place, which is really wholeness. Because then I begin to move up and find my true self. And I would say my true self and all of our true selves as children of God or children of the universe, however you might want to put it. And that we're all involved in this sacred web. And there's something, too, about the learning process. Do you find at times that you're just drawn to want to learn? That there's a deep learning, that there's a deep yearning of wanting to learn. And again, I think this comes from that deep sense of being filled with the Spirit. And I thought of a poem, and I don't know how well these poems are going to fit, but a short one by Robert Frost called The Pastor. And I thought about this in terms of the whole learning process. I don't know if some of you remember this very short poem, but he wrote it in the springtime, and he says, "I'm going out to clean the pasture spring. I'll only stop to rake the leaves away and wait to watch the water clear. I may. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I'm going out to fetch the little calf that's standing by its mother. It's so young it totters when she licks it with her tongue. I shan't be gone long. You come too." And there's that invitation that's always there for learning. You come too. Now, where does that invitation come from? And again, I think it comes from the source, the font of loving, the font of relating, the font of knowing, or what I would call God. There's always that invitation, and there's a sacredness. And when we talk about knowledge, also we take a look at a quote from Parker Palmer on your sheet where he says, "The origin of knowledge is love. The goal of a knowledge arising from love is the reunification and reconstruction of our broken selves and our broken world." And again, it comes back to this notion of wholeness, salvation, the beautiful tradition, the Judaic tradition to heal the world. We're called to heal the world, to make it whole, okay? And so I think that really is such an essential part of teaching and learning, okay? And I'd like to share a little bit about some of the characteristics that I think are important in the teaching learning process, or this process of deep knowing. Certainly, I think to be aware of the sacredness of it, to be aware that it's always relational. And I have to tell this story. The first semester I was here, the fall of 1981, I started teaching. We were teaching anthropology, and I'll tell you, I was mentoring with Tom Liddell, thank God, because we were doing cultural anthropology. But at any rate, I had done the class, and afterwards, a non-traditional student who was sitting in the back of the class came up. And you know how when you first start to do anything, particularly teaching, you want to be liked and you want people to like you. So the student came up and she said to me, you know, I really enjoyed that class. So I really enjoyed it. I should have let it go at that. But you know when you're kind of fishing? I said, oh, I said, did you enjoy the content? You know, we were talking about culture and culture concepts. So no, I don't really remember much about that. So I said, well, was it the subject matter? You know, cultural anthropology. And she said, no, she said, I'm sure it wasn't because I really, this is not the class I'm supposed to be in. It's supposed to be world religions. So I said, well, what did you enjoy? She said to me, you're Italian-American, aren't you? And I said, yeah. I said, I can tell by the way you talk and move your hands. I said, also, by the way you talk, you're from northern Jersey, right? And I said, yeah. I said, well, you know what? I'm Italian-American. I'm from northern Jersey. I just moved to this area, and I don't know anybody. And when I first came to the school, I didn't know if I was going to stay, but I came into this class, and your voice sounded like home. And that struck me. Now, at first I didn't think, oh, great, here I have a college professor. She didn't remember anything I said. My voice sounded like home. But what she was really saying was that there was a relationship there. And I like to think, I don't know if she dropped that, but I like to think that feeling that she was at home, that relationship, that there was a certain knowledge in that she had a place here, that there was someone like her here, you know. And as it turns out, it's funny, my brother-in-law, Phil, got this picture, and I didn't realize getting. And I thought of someone when Phil brought this picture in. I thought of Mrs. Bruce. And I don't know, Ralph, if you had her. You had Mrs. Bruce at PS number 7 in Jersey. Mrs. Bruce was talking to my mother one time at a PTA meeting, and Ralph will tell you, and Judy will tell you how difficult it was to get my mother to a PTA meeting. So she came there, and Mrs. Bruce said to her, Mrs. Calderone, be grateful if Jimmy makes it through high school. He's a nice kid, but, there's only so much we can do. And my mother thought, well, that's all right. The very fact that I'm here was based on relationship. But there was another teacher also, and I love Mrs. Bruce, by the way, but there was another teacher. I had two, Mrs. Trachtenberg, and there weren't too many Jewish teachers or administrators. Our principal was Jewish, Mr. Grossman, who was a graduate of the University of Scranton, but not too many other teachers. And Mrs. Trachtenberg was a very small woman, and people would pick on her a lot. The kids would pick on her a lot. And she said to me one time, I'll never forget this, and I don't know why she said it. She said to me, you know what, I don't care what your grades are. You can be anything you want to be. And I'll tell you, that stuck. That stuck. Because we need to hear that relationship is so much a part of this process of knowledge. And so, first of all, I think the teaching learning process begins with grasping or accepting the fact that we are accepted. As the Lutheran theologian Paul, one of the toughest things he said is to embrace the reality that we are accepted, that we are acceptable, that there's nothing we have to do that's going to make ourselves more lovable. You feel like you've got to perform, you feel like you've got to come up with some criteria. You're closed off. I'm closed off to some degree. Another thing that I think that's really important is to recognize my vulnerability and my brokenness. We bring that to teaching. We bring that to learning. It's not something it's the broken heart that really is able to grow in compassion. Perhaps it's the emptiness that I feel at times that leaves room for other people. And so that brokenness, I have to tell you, at times when I share, and my family knows this, I was a college dropout. And I dealt with, as some of you probably had, some severe depression and anxiety, and wondered if I was going to make it through. The fact that I taught here for 35 years, I never thought I'd be alive for 35 years. But, here I am. And many of the students over the years can connect with that. They can connect with the fact that, you can be broken and you can mess up, okay? And you can still make it, kind of thing. The notion of making meaning of things, even making meaning with students' mistakes, making meaning of it before we attempt to maybe chide them or punish them, which sometimes they need to be chided and challenged, certainly. but trying to make meaning. Because many times students will come and basically say, should I be here? Maybe I'm not smart enough. Okay? I had a student in one of my classes just the other day, and she showed me her notes. And her notes were incredible. They were absolutely incredible. And she failed the last test, and she was saying, maybe I shouldn't even be here, kind of thing. I said, look, obviously there's something else going on. Because with notes like that and given your participation, you know, something else is going on. So let's relook at what's happening. But trying to find meaning is so important. I said to my students, you know, sometimes we think that the content is in the book. Well, yeah, the content is in the book, but I went to a workshop one time. You know how when someone says one thing that's worth the price of admission? And the person said to me, did you ever consider that you're part of the content? So that whatever our profession, whatever our occupation, whatever our relationships, it's not just what we say, it's our very presence. We're part of the content. We bring with us all of the cultural layers and all of the experiences that we have as well. The other thing that I think is so important in the teaching learning process, in this process of knowledge, is what some call meaningful ambiguity, which means sometimes we make decisions and we do things and we don't have all the facts. As a matter of fact, we almost never have all the facts, you know, kind of thing. And yet we hold it in tension. You know, we're living at a time, too, where isn't it true that people can make divides? You know, it's hard to talk about politics or religion or try to talk about politics and religion, and if you're throwing sex in there, too, you got a powder keg. But actually, I think part of learning is holding things in tension, not necessarily having to draw a line. Living the question, you might say. Recognizing that to the extent that we maybe share very opposite points of view, maybe there is no resolution. Maybe the resolution is in living out the tension and not quitting, not going away, kind of thing. The other notion, too, that certainly the Sisters of Mercy have taught me over the years, as some of you may know, the word mercy really comes from the same root as mercantile. Okay? And it really has to do with reciprocity. And so what mercy really is an openness to be reciprocal or to relate to one, back and forth. So that anytime I think I'm helping, I have to ask the question, well, how are you helping me too? And it's not trite. Any of you who have taught will know this. Anytime you teach something, don't you learn a great deal? I mean, you really do. You know, as you're, even something you've taught 100 times, there's something about, you know, in the world of religion classes, when students are talking about their own spiritual journeys, and they're pulling from different religious traditions. And I can't tell you, you know, it's a privilege to be able to read those papers because they really help me to understand even more fully my own faith tradition as I go. Community. One of the things I think this university, when we are at our best, we do so well. And that is being a supportive community, which is part of how we learn. I mentioned in my class, and I don't know if you found this to be true, I said, you know, you may not know the other people in the class, but their very presence, their being here will influence your capacity to learn. And there's a lot of studies that indicate that so when people have done sociograms, when they said, well, who in the room, who in your classroom do you think you'd most like to be like, or who in your classroom really helped you? What they found out that sometimes people are identifying people they don't even know, but they see them in the classroom. They see how they think, or they're impressed by their sense of humor, or there's a presence of gentleness about them. And so the learning process really is, as we know, terribly social. And that's not just right. That it is our very presence in this room makes a difference. Have you ever had the experience of being in a room and you just had a bad vibration? Or being in the room and you just felt things were okay. And you wonder how that happens. Speaking about being in a room, is Joe Rogan here today? I don't know if Joe was able to make it. A wonderful, wonderful teacher and dealing with some health issues now. But I was going to mention, a thought just came to mind when I talked about being in a room and what a difference. Joe Rogan came in to evaluate me one time for teaching. And Joe, as you know, is an excellent teacher. He's an expert. He's on the State Board of Education, and he's done tremendous publishing. So Joe was in there, and he's taking notes. And I was in room 330 in Mercy Hall, and for many years we didn't have screens. So when the windows were open, I mean, things could come in. Right? So I'm lecturing, right? And Joe's back here, I'm feeling a bit anxious, and I've got good peripheral vision. And I think I see something coming in. Well, this bird comes through the window, circles, now I duck under the circles the room 3 times, smacks into the wall. I wasn't killed. One of my students picked it up and took it out, okay? And if Joe was here, he'd remember this. You know what he did? When he wrote my evaluation, it was a pretty good evaluation. He accused me of using inappropriate props. But, but I remember that, and the humor that he would bring, even with something like that. He could take something like a bird flying in the window and make something out of it. The notion of, it's funny, but one of the words that came to mind when I thought about the teaching learning process and knowledge is the word sanity, coming from the Latin word, again, wholeness and health. When Misericordia is at its best, it empowers people. When Misericordia is at its best, it lifts people up. Years ago, some of us used to be concerned because we were evaluated by the accrediting body, and they would say to us, this school really does well with students that are not well prepared. You really do excellent. People don't drop out of this place. They seem to excel. And some of us were even feeling a little badly about that. Well, gee, don't we want the greatest students? Well, yeah, we got those too. But there's something here, and not just faculty, staff and coaches and everybody. The students would say this is a place that you feel that you can grow, that you can learn, and support each other. To some degree, I want to wrap things up because I know it's time to get something to eat. I thought of another poem that when I thought about the teaching and learning process, because in some ways, to coin Richard Rohr, the Franciscan priest who does a lot of great writing, he says that, spirituality is really a process of downward mobility. We usually talk about upward mobility. But Richard Rohr says, no, it's downward mobility. Because to the extent that we continue to learn and to find out who we are and how we're connected to one another, and the fact that we really are enfleshed spiritual beings that really matter, that we were able to bring that back down, to go deeper into whatever it is we're doing, whatever our occupation is, whatever our job is, whatever our life is. You remember the poem by Robert Frost Birches? If you had never read this one, Robert Frost looked at bird streets, and it was during the winter time, and he saw the branches that were bent to the ground, and he gave meaning to that. He said, I like to think that those branches are bent down, not so much from ice storms and ice bending them. I like to think that there were kids who climbed up there, boys and girls who climbed up there, and they just grabbed on those branches as high as they could go, to touch the heavens, and then they just swung out and came back to earth. And in many ways, that's what I think the teaching learning process is. As we open ourselves to truly who we are, beloved and loved and belonging, as we see ourselves as beloved, as we see our connection, as we see our, for want of a better word, our spiritual dimension, our divinity, our dignity, we're able to come back down to earth and bring something there that's really meaningful. And I'd just like to share a little bit from the poem as I conclude today. And Robert Frost, again, is talking about the branches, and he says, some of you may think I'm getting too fantastical now, and I know ice storms bend branches and all that kind of thing. But then he ends it by this. He says, I'd like to get away from Earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. Now may no fate willfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish and snatch me away, not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white top toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of branches. And to some degree, I think that's what the learning process is. That continual process of going up, okay, in a sense, and really getting a better sense of who we are and who others are, okay, and then bringing that back down to whatever we do. And so let me end by saying, you know, I mentioned that, that 35 years ago, that student in my class said to me, you know, I don't know what you said,